You, Logan. I never remember the command to switch it to pasture. Uh, I did it. I was close, Echo. Thank you. Appreciate the vote of confidence. Well, hello everyone. How are we doing this evening? I'll get them next week, guys, or next time. I don't know if I'm doing it next week. I'll get it next week or next time. I wrote it down. Who's here? Who's here? Roxers Boxers is here. Big Al is here. Alexis here. Novice Egg Potato Queen. My mother. Hello, Mom Tomology. Marky Mark. Hello. Bumblebee. Very apt. Cat got your keyboard. Mouse 96. Gray Sea Paws. Ophelia. Hello. Salty Cajun. Guys, it's a little cold. I don't know how much bugging we're gonna see tonight, but we're gonna try. While we get started, does anyone have any pressing bug questions or fun bug anecdotes from the week? I'm prepared to yap, but I do always like answering your questions and hearing what you guys have been up to a little bit more. Americal212, you must be new here. I'm a beetle guy. The group that I work on specifically are ground beetles. So I do have a slight bias towards my favorite there. Omifron is pretty good. That's a pretty good beetle and probably one of my favorites. Let's see. Get a link here. Sorry about the typing, but that's that. That's always a good question. It's hard to choose. There's over 1 million described species of insect. Over 450,000 of them are beetles. In my group, there's over 44,000 species described worldwide. So it's like having to pick a favorite child out of 44,000, and that's pretty tough. Quartz sneeze. Looked at fruit flies under the microscope today. That's exciting. What was that for? What did you see under the microscope? Big Al, I didn't. Somebody pinged me right after it happened, and I didn't have time to go back and watch the VOD yet. But yes, I did see that the scorpions moved into new homes, but I didn't see it happen. Novice Egg saw a black and white ladybug. That's so sick. Shrimp Baby 13, first time sitting on a bug hunt. Well, welcome. Amanda took care of the barbers today, and they were like, oh my god, Amanda, she's the best. I believe that. Amanda, you are the best. Dark, I don't know if we need permission slips today. I don't know if we're going anywhere crazy. Sticking in the pasture. Cold. Okay. I'm quite behind on chat, so just slowly working through it. Roxers Boxers found a cold bee on the ground during the cold weather. What's the best thing I can do for it? Is it kind of a goner? You could try to offer it sugar water. A lot of the time when you do find displaced bees during colder times of the year, they are actually honeybees that came from someone's hive or something in a backyard. And honeybees, at least in the US, are non-native. So not a huge deal, honestly, if you have one that didn't make it. A lot of the native bees have better temperature cues and regulations of knowing when to come out. But you could potentially offer it sugar water if you wanted to, but there are still other things out. There are woodpeckers and nuthatches and things like that that will still eat insects during the winter. So, not wasted, but maybe part of the cycle of life. Okay. Let me catch up here. Course to use it for genetics class. Oh, different phenotypes. Cool. Yeah, that's like a really great way. And a lot of people think that if you're a scientist working with insects, that's the kind of work that you actually do. I haven't done fruit fly stuff in a very long time. I did I did work in a fly lab for one semester in college. Their normal fly rearer, so the person that keeps the colonies and stuff going, was doing a study abroad or something. And they needed someone else from the department to come work and like keep the fly stock alive to do the experiments. And so I spent a semester farming fruit flies, which are pretty easy because they have like fruit fly specific media. It's like a powder that you mix with water to make like a gel, and the fruit flies can just subsist on that. But we also had to work with caliphorids, which are bottle flies, which are like the metallic bluey green flies that you see on dead stuff. And those were a lot less pleasant to take care of because we were homogenizing liver, beef liver, and raising the immatures on that. And so we would have these big kind of pie plates full of meat juice that they would feed on. And then when they were ready to pupate, they would crawl out of it and then pupate around inside these big mesh cages. It's pretty stinky. Wasn't super fun. Mini Pearl asked if we could sex determine the scorpions, if there are characters to look out for. There are. They might still be a little bit too small, but on the underside of scorpions, they have these things called pectines, which sort of look like a comb. They sort of look like gills, actually, on the underside of the scorpion. And they're a sensory tool. They use them to kind of help smell the ground as they're walking over it and things like that. But the number of teeth and the shaping of the teeth on the pectines on the scorpion are different between the sexes oftentimes, but it's not a hard set thing across all scorpions. So like males of one species might only have like 10 to 12 and the females would have 20 plus. But then in a different species, the females would only have like 13 to 15 and the males would only have like 8. So that would be a specific thing we'd have to look up for emperor scorpions, but it could be done, and it's pretty non-invasive because if you just put the scorpion in a Tupperware or something like a clear glass thing, you can count them underneath if you just take a picture. So that might be something to talk to Amanda about, since she's in chat and she actually gets to interact with the scorpions. Oh, the 1229 incident. Well, not a problem, Logan. Sorry. I'm still catching up here, but... Super Terrific, that's a cool question. Can bugs be leucistic? I ID'd my first leucistic bird recently. That's fun. Leucism and, like, albinism doesn't really occur in insects as far as I know. a lot of people will think they have found a an albino insect, like an albino cockroach or something, especially if they keep them as pets. But when insects molt, they shed their exoskeleton. So they take off the whole outside covering, and when they are fresh out of that, they're in a state called being teneral, Teneral. And during that time, they're white. Uh, and so they do look albino, and it's kind of a funny thing in cockroach keeping groups specifically. People post all the time that they found their albino cockroach. When in fact, just giving it time, it will harden up and sclerotize, is the process of like the exoskeleton hardening and developing its full color. So they can't be albino because of the way that pigments are structured in the exoskeleton versus in like feather proteins and human and skin and fur and things like that. I did read up on this at some point. I will try to find the paper and maybe put it in the Discord when we're done here. But as far as I know, despite us mass rearing flies and things like that for many, many, many years, there's never been a true proven case of albinism in insects. But they do get like melanistic, where they can be darker than normal, where they will get larger coverings of black on them rather than like being albino leucistic, where there's lots of white. Granny, how often do you interact with your tarantulas? Do different species more TLC once their enclosure is in full swing? I do all of my feeding and all of the watering of all the plants and animals in my house on typically Wednesdays. I usually do them on Wednesdays. Wednesday has been quote unquote feeding day for the last like 7 years of my life. But on Chat Cat weeks, I do them on Thursdays because I don't go home between work and doing Chat Chats. I'm still at the lab right now as we speak. The nice thing about invertebrate pets is how once you have them set, like low maintenance they are for the most part. All of my tarantulas and everything get fed once a week on Wednesdays. All of my plants get watered on Wednesdays. So if there's a plant that needs to be watered more often, it doesn't usually survive very long, and then I don't have that plant anymore. I can, in fact, handle plants that need to be watered less frequently, as long as it's on like a 2 or 3 week basis, so I can time everything and again water everything on Wednesdays. I feed my sourdough starter on Wednesdays as well, so literally every living thing in my house besides me gets fed only on Wednesdays. And that's helpful for me. That's just like a good schedule, especially when I go out of town. Like I was home for the holidays recently, and I only had to have a pet sitter come over once, and finding a pet sitter for 80 odd invertebrates is a little bit harder than finding someone to watch your cat. So it's tricky, but for your question, I check them. I peep in on everybody's cages every morning and every night before I go to bed, just to see if, you know, maybe it looks extra dry this week in there, or if somebody molted or is getting ready to molt. I can bump the humidity up a little bit so they have a little bit easier of a time molting. So I check them twice a day, every single day. But in terms of like actually doing maintenance on them, it is generally once a week. There are some species that need more TLC once everything is set up. Living in Arizona, my little hygrometer thing right now that I have on my desk says that we are sitting at 16% humidity, and that's pretty dry. So my substrate in my enclosures dries out very, very quickly compared to when I lived in Kansas or when I lived in Florida. So water is the big thing, and I don't want any of my little friends to go thirsty. So In terms of needing more TLC, there are certain species of tarantulas that need higher humidity requirements, and I do have to check those more often, just because of the environment where I live. I could get like a humidifier and everything like that, but not everybody needs that extra humidity, so I just take a little bit more of a chance when I can. Magnus, not Carlson, do bugs sleep? Yeah. But definitely bug sleep. Oh, honeybee's here. Hello, Beeger. Good to see you. Do bugs sleep? Yes, they do. It's not the same. Obviously, when we lie down to have our evening rest, or mid-afternoon nap if you're lucky, insects don't have eyelids, so there's nothing to really close off. It's just kind of like Patchy and Noodle. They don't have eyelids to be able to close off and make it darker for themselves, but they do rest and kind of shut down some of their general body processes. They slow it down like we do with our breathing, make it even, and our heart rate making it even. So they do sleep. I don't really know a lot of the tenets of like how that works. That's another thing that I can look and check and put a PDF in the Discord once we're done here. But yes, insects have to sleep because otherwise they would be too tired to do all of their little buggy activities. Oh, juggling grenades. Hello, hello. Glad you made it. Still checking up on chat. Let's see. Amanda, for being cold, there are no buggies, but leaving a little bit of food out sometimes help, or is that asking them to freeze next to a piece of food? We got a bug! Logan, yes. It's the letter S. We found a wild S tonight. Amanda, I don't think it's really worth it. The stuff that we would get with leaving out little piles of food would probably be ants. And not that ants aren't cool, but you guys just have a lot of fire ants, so we don't necessarily want to encourage that in the little pasture stall here. When it's warmer out, I think we could probably get some cool stuff with the little bug picnics that Allison used to sing about. But yeah, not right now. There's not much we can do. It's cold for bugs, and that is what it is. It's all right. We can make it through anyway. Armor, have I ever lost track of a bug in my house or my lab? Oh yeah. I have not actually had, in the grand scheme of things, not many escapees. I know people are gonna say that any escapees is too many escapees, and I think you're right. But granted that I've had more than 20 invertebrates for the last 8 years, I've really only had 3 escapes. They were all returned. I did find all of them. The first one, in fact, was the first ever Eastern Hercules beetle that I ever found. Oh, Tortilla, thanks for the bits. The Hercules beetle has pretty big claws on their tarsi. They use them to grip onto trees and stuff like that, but I got home really late from that trip and I decided to put it in a little mesh, like pop-up butterfly cage. And its claws and its mouth parts were sharp enough to chew out of the mesh cage, and fly around my room at 3 in the morning and land on my face. that was horrific. And waking up with a big bug hitting you in the face and not knowing what it was, I kind of yoinked it and tossed it across the room, and I had little scratches all around my eye from where its little feet grabbed onto my skin. But he was promptly returned to a more secure cage, and that was my first ever invertebrate escape that I've had. I was pet sitting a friend's tarantula, and it bolted out of the enclosure and got inside of the bottom of my chest freezer. So I did have to turn that over, completely dismantle that, and pull my friend's spider out of there. And then one time I got a call in the middle of feeding day, and I had just left a lid off. And one of my first ever tarantulas that I've had since 2014, she got out, and she's much bigger now than when I first got her. And she was pretty easy to find because it's hard to lose a 6-inch spider with only a couple hours. So as for Shrezno, yeah, if you want it to be, it can be. All right, catching up again. Tortilla, thanks for the bits. We're trying to get a millipede hat, I think. I had a mantis land on my face in the dark here. Sounds even worse. Yeah, you know, it was fine. I've had worse happen out in the field, but this one was particularly spooky. You know, you don't expect in your house to have something land on your face in the middle of the night, and that's just like a jarring experience. Whatever it would be. It wasn't necessarily worse because it was a bug. But yeah, those are the only times that I've lost live inverts in at home or in the lab. I certainly did have like fruit fly escapees and stuff like that when I worked in the fly lab for that one semester. But I did also have a bed bug internship for a summer. I was in charge of colony maintenance and morphometrics, so I was feeding colonies of bed bugs, and that was horrific to think about the implications if I did, in fact, let one of those out and accidentally take one home. So, throughout the course of that internship, I was very, very nervous every time I would leave to come home from work. But nothing ever came of it. Never had any issues with bringing bed bugs home accidentally, so thank everything for that. But when I was doing the fly stuff, I definitely did, lose a couple fruit flies here or there. And then doing my specimen work now, for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with what I do, I am working on creating identification resources for this one particular group of beetles in the US. And so I work in a museum that has about 2.5 million pinned insects. And my personal insect collection is somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 specimens, I would estimate. So to do a lot of my work, I have a lot of time spent at the microscope. And sometimes when I'm in the process of like preparing the specimen, getting it ready, the smallest US ground beetle is just about 1 millimeter long. So I am working under a microscope with a thing that is about the height of a dime, not like the face of the coin, but like the edge of the coin. And so I've lost plenty of those. It's very unfortunate, and I try to do everything to mitigate that because I do probably more than the average bug lover. I do kill more bugs than a lot of people. But they do all end up in a museum for science and things like that. So I don't like killing them needlessly. And if I lose the specimen, they are not, in fact, going on to fulfill their higher purpose. of being a scientific thing for many, many, many years to come. So I try not to lose as many as I can, but that happens a lot more. I could not tell you the individual instances of when that happens, just because there have been so many specimens that have crossed my desk over the years. Naked and Afraid is so funny. Ooh, just getting to chat about the bedbug internship. Yeah, it was scary, but man, it paid well. It paid well because none of the other students wanted to work on it. So I was getting quite a bit of money for full time for the entire summer. So Magnus Nut Carlson, how would you pin something that small? I'm still catching up for what I was just talking about. That's a good question. You don't actually pin them. So insects in museums you've seen are typically on these metal insect pins, and there are different sizes of insect pins for different sizes of insect. You have triple zeros, which are super, super thin and flimsy, and I don't know how anybody actually works with those, all the way up to size 6, which are all the same length. The pins are not any different in length, it's just the thickness and the width of the pin. And then you have size 7 insect pins, which are actually the only ones that are taller than any of the other ones. And those are used for like your giant scarabs and things like that. I had to use them for some of the longhorn beetles that we got in Thailand this summer. But your general bread and butter insect pin is like a 2 or a 3. And for stuff that small, a millimeter, even the triple zeros are not small enough. So we do what is called pointing. I have a special hole punch that punches out little tiny paper triangles, and I use extremely high tech Elmer's glue and just put the little tiniest bit on the tip of the point, attach it to the side of the specimen, and then I put the pin through the paper triangle. I definitely have specimens that I can take pictures of, and I'll put those in the Discord as well when we're done here. But that is how you deal with specimens that are too small to pin. You point them. And I do a lot of pointing. Oh, Ophelia. Ophelia covered that for me. Thank you. Well, we got another beetle here. It's one of our dung beetles. Can't tell which one, but that's a not so alive dung beetle friend there. Super Terrific, is there a good publicly available beetle or other bug ID guide key for North America online? Found one for flies and bumblebees and was interested in other bugs, so I can learn what markings I need to photograph. Bug guide is going to be probably one of the best, if not the best resource for North American insects. It doesn't tell you what you need to ID it. I just posted a link in chat, but it is a guide of specimens or of individuals that have had photos uploaded from North America. So Bug Guide is a North America only resource, which is pretty unfortunate for everyone outside of North America. I would have to think if there's any more available keys or guides that would help with that. There are definitely good books. Art Evans has this 2-part series, Beetles of Eastern North America and Beetles of Western North America, that are really, really good info dense with photos, summaries of the eastern and the western beetles. But they're not super expensive, but they are more costly than a free website. I will have to think about that one as well. I'll add it to my notes. Guide for NA Beetles etc. online. But Bug Guide is one of my most used websites. It's one of the 4 tabs that opens up when I open up the internet. So I am there every day, multiple times a day. And it is phenomenal once you get past it looks like it was designed in 1992 and not changed, because it kind of does. iNaturalist is another good one. I see that Novice Egg suggested that as well. iNaturalist is good. There's a good community there of people that go on and do the IDs, but with insects, and I know I've said this before, I'm kind of dubious about a lot of the IDs on there that get done with just photos. There's too many insects, and oftentimes people aren't taking the right photos like you want to, Super Terrific, to actually document like the things that people need to see to be able to identify insects. So I am hesitant a lot with iNaturalist's like machine learning ID suggestions, but there are actual people that go on and identify stuff on iNaturalist, and they're very good, and they can also oftentimes tell you what would need to be photographed to get it better. So if you upload it, an expert might tell you like, oh, we can't get this beyond genus, and you can then reply to their comment and ask like, what I would need to do, or what you would need to do to get those things identified further. Mayhem Ospreys. I must know what my favorite isopod is. I like the clown ones. Oh god, I did isopod so long ago. Armadillidium klugi, I think, is a scientific name for those. The Klugi Montenegros are the ones that I had before. They can still roll up in a ball, which is very key to isopods for me. The zebras that Alveus has, they can roll up, but the BBs don't roll up. They're all isopods, but to me, the roly-poly, like ones that actually can roll into a ball, those have always been my favorite ever since I was a kid. So yeah, Armadillidium klugi or oftentimes called clown isopods. I think those are my favorite. I like the bright colors, and I like that they can roll up into a ball. I'm a simple man. Oh, Ophelia, you're so right. Giant deep sea isopods are also cool as heck. Isopods are neat in general. GDH. Can I briefly speak about insect genome sequencing and what you would hope to learn? Yes, just give me 1 second. Catching up to see what everyone else is saying. Isopod tattoo sounds awesome. There's a lot we can do with genomes. Genetic science with insects has come a really, really long way, and particularly in the last 20 years with regards to using it as a form to help reinforce identifications or to help verify identifications. We used this one gene called CO1, and people will do CO1 barcoding, which will basically be taking that one gene from an insect and matching it in a database to see if basically if it exists already, or if you have a larva that you have never seen the adult of, or I guess you have an adult that and a larva that you've never seen before, you can take legs off of that larva and use that CO1 barcode to match them to a known species of adult. And you can also use that to say if one species that looks very similar that you collected in one area is actually the same thing as a species that you collected in a different area. CO1 barcoding is like base level DNA analysis with insects. It is not whole genome sequencing whatsoever. But with new next-gen techniques like UCEs, ultra-conserved elements, and things like that, looking at full genomes gives us a much clearer picture of actual evolutionary time and what those different parts of the genome actually do. So with UCEs, you're trying to pull out these ultra conserved elements. That's what UCE stands for. And you're looking for these elements that trace back through long periods of time, these little pieces of information in the genome that are conserved over hundreds of millions of years. And that can tell you and give you a better idea about like when beetles first evolved. Yes, we have the fossil record, but you can now trace back and sort of contextualize where those things started showing up, and that's some things that have been going on with more in-depth insect genome sequencing. I do not do genetic work really at all, so I am not speaking maybe the most intelligently or the most clearly on this, but I can give you a good starting point, and I would be happy to send more papers and information in the Discord should you be interested. But the other cool thing that we do learn from genomes in general, and specifically with insects, is like what each part of it does. We have a very complex genome as humans, but there are insects that have genomes that are massive for their size. And so figuring out like why these things have all of these genetic markers when you're a fraction the size of a human is really interesting, and being able to figure out what those different parts of the genome actually contribute to. So like this section here, this part codes for wings, this part codes for legs. And even though you have legs being coded for in all insects, because all insects will have 6 legs, are the leg coding genes in crickets different from those in cockroaches or beetles? And when you have multiple genomes of different insects and understanding what each region does, you can do really cool like evo-devo stuff, like evolutionary development, and like seeing how wings evolved over time, or how certain structures have arisen in different groups, but not necessarily from the same initial structure of the insect. And then you can also do some really crazy like mad scientist stuff if you discover Hox genes, which are the ones like telling you which part of the insect genome codes for what specific structure. You can give insects more legs. You can insert their leg coding genes onto their first abdominal segment, and you can have them grow extra legs. You can give them more wings. You can take wings away. And that stuff is really, really cool. And again, out of my depth by a very, very long margin. I am a humble morphology, physiology guy. So I look at external characters and I use DNA when I have to kind of back up those findings. A lot of those folks that do a lot of that very in-depth DNA work don't spend a lot of time with the actual specimen under the microscope. They're working in a wet lab. So it's not it's not my thing, not my favorite, but it is very, very cool. Granny also asked, what is the largest full body insect that I've worked with? Was the size intimidating at all? That's an interesting question. I have, I guess I should get clarification on that. Do you mean live or do you mean specimen? Because those are very actually similar answers. um, but I've got different answers for that. Granny, did you mean live bugs or dead bugs? I'm catching up. I'm sorry. I did a lot of yapping. You guys did a lot of typing. Could you double the legs of a millipede? Probably. I mean, compared to a centipede, they are doubled, but um, yeah, I don't know that anybody's done Hawkskins with that sort of stuff, uh, but I suppose it is possible. I don't know how that would work, but you can do anything if you're mad scientisty enough. Helen, I also want to know where the Beatles be. um, yeah, I guess if I can answer Granny's question, I still don't know which one he wanted, but um, the largest, both live and dead specimen now that I've ever worked with. I had a friend who needed to move and got rid of their Goliath bird-eating tarantula. Those are the largest spider in the world. They've got a leg span of about 11 inches when they're fully grown. And I was planning to pick it up one weekend, and like maybe the week before, uh, it didn't make it out of its most recent molt. So I did pin and gut and then frame that for him. It being an 11-inch spider is like is very obviously not a small thing. And even though I did a lot of work for a long time to get over my fear of spiders to where I am now, an 11-inch spider is like too big. It was really cool, but still definitely intimidating working with that thing. But then as a specimen, that was intimidating because it was one of the early times that I was doing specimen prep as like a pet memorial sort of thing. That's the cool thing about bug pets. It's like not as weird to keep them in a frame as it is a vertebrate pet. So I had to gut the tarantula because it would have rotted from the inside out otherwise. And man, it stunk so bad. It was so bad, and I put a bunch of cotton balls in that to keep the abdomen plumped out and everything like that. And I actually have pictures of that still, so I can also post. I'm gonna have lots to post in the Discord after this. Tarantula frame. And so that was intimidating working with it as a specimen, just because it was something that was going to someone as like a memorial piece for a pet. But other than that, working with big specimens is not that much different than working with small specimens. You just need a lot more pins to hold everything in place while it dries. Bye, Donkus. Have fun. Sorry, I think I probably missed it when you left, but do they actually eat birds? Nicole, no, hello. First of all, hello. Good to see you here. They can, but they don't usually. Uh, Bird-eating tarantulas got that name because they did find bird bones in burrows at one point, but an 11-inch spider with an abdomen probably the size of like a ping pong ball, if not bigger, uh, that is not a tree dwelling spider. They do not live in trees. There are tarantulas that live in trees, but the giant, like 11-inch leg span bird eaters do not. What happened was, and when they originally found and named this and gave it that common name, there was a bird nest above it, and what they think happened is that it opportunistically fed on a baby bird that fell out of a nest. And that's where they got that idea from, that they eat birds. They're certainly big enough to do it, but it is not something that happens regularly. They're feeding on mostly other invertebrates, but they are big enough that they can feed on lizards or snakes or even mice and stuff like that sometimes. But the bulk of their diet in the wild is still going to be other bugs. Granny, yes, I will put pictures. Haven't we had this conversation before where Allison labeled us hairless paper eating apes because we're technically capable of doing so? I don't remember if you had that conversation. That might have been an Allison talk before I got here. Uh, but yeah, like always, Allison's right. Yeah, just because we can doesn't mean that we always do. And it's the same for bird eating spiders. What would I say is the most intelligent bug, either individually or in terms of societal structure slash development? The easy answer to that are the eusocial insects, so ants, bees, and termites. They have this really remarkable, and I know we talked about it just a couple weeks ago, but they have this colony system of being truly social, which involves overlapping generations. So you have multiple ages of organisms in the colony working together. You have reproductive division of labor, which means that there's like a caste system and different members of the colony have different jobs. And also cooperative brood care, which means that there are insects taking care of young that are not their own. So, like in an ant colony, only the queen ant lays eggs, and she is the only one that produces new ants. But she has her workers, which are her daughters, taking care of the other offspring. And then you also have like worker ants and soldiers. So there's the division of labor, and then you've got the caste system where they have the different jobs and things like that. So that's a very easy answer to that question, is that ants are remarkably socially evolved, and like knowing how to work together and kind of keeping all the troops in line, so to speak, like doing things for the greater good of the colony is remarkable. And I worked in an ant lab for 2 years, and it was just really, really cool. Individually is a really interesting question, though. And I don't have an answer to that. Um, and that one's hard for me because there's so many like remarkable things that insects do that can be seen as intelligent because it's stuff that like we don't do or don't think about. Uh, like dung beetles use the Milky Way to navigate. They put little tiny blinders on dung beetles and they didn't know which way to roll their ball because they couldn't navigate with the stars. And that's insane. And you have, they have these things where they taught bumblebees to like play soccer a couple of years ago. Like bumblebees got a reward for putting a little tiny soccer ball into a little tiny goal, and like they learned how to do that. And then you have like, God, bugs are so cool, guys. Bugs are so cool. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but yeah, it's just so neat how much stuff can happen. And like intelligence is a hard thing, but I think forming societies on a small scale is pretty dang intelligent. So I'll probably stick with the latter half of your question there and just say ants. Salty Cajun, have you ever eaten a bug? And if so, how did I reconcile that betrayal? Well, if we're talking about like the first bug I ever ate, I was like a child. Um, and I just put a bug in my mouth. I don't know. I remember distinctly one time I went to tennis camp and I ate a cicada off the tennis court. Um, for probably some nominal amount of money that should have been much more for realistically what I did. But um, I have, and I'm also a big proponent of entomophagy, which is the act of eating bugs like for a food source. Uh, I see someone mentioned it. Somebody remembered. AMS418 keeping tabs on me. Good looking out. Thank you. Appreciate it. I did speak once about mealworm tacos. I had a mealworm farm going for feeding my vast array of spiders, but they were producing too quickly. And so when I lived with my one roommate, about once every other month, we had enough mealworms in the mealworm farm that we would do mealworm hummus, we would do mealworm tacos, we could just bake them into other things. Um, but yeah, I'm a big proponent of it, honestly. There's a lot of benefits to getting protein that way, and it is certainly a very Western ideal of us in the US and, much of North America and even Europe to not eat bugs. Most of the world does eat bugs in some way, shape, or form. Even here in like the Southwest, I'm in Arizona. I've been to Mexico several times since I've moved here, and they do chapulines, which are like fried grasshoppers. They will also do like chocolate covered ants. I used to read about being able to buy chocolate covered ants like at a movie theater, like you would, I don't know, like Junior Mints. I don't know. But yeah, people all over the world eat bugs, and it's like a very, very common thing. And I am certainly for it. I know we've all heard Maya's messaging about the dairy industry and consuming less beef. And you can raise a consumable amount of insects in a couple of square feet with very minimal input of cheap ingredients. Like I would feed mine potatoes, apples, and carrots, and they were living in this like big 50-pound thing of wheat bran. Um, and you get a lot of protein output for very little like water and resource input. So I do think it is a good way for humans in general to deal with maybe and kind of mitigate some of the climate crisis issues happening from big feedlot farms. But I do also recognize that it's not everyone's cup of tea, and like people are certainly hesitant for it. I appreciate people that are open to the idea and willing to try it, even if it's just a novelty. So, out here in Arizona, we have people selling scorpion lollipops in most gift shops. It is like a novelty Arizona thing. Probably some of the first bugs that I ate like on purpose. I was on a trip with my dad to the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, which is like full of medical oddities, and that's like a whole weird thing in its own. But I remember in their gift shop, they had these little boxes of like honey barbecue flavored crickets that they were selling in the gift shop as like definitely as like a novelty gross out food item, but it was fine. I mean, you dry it out and you put some Cheeto dust on it, like it's just a crunchy little snack. Um, it is certainly not right for everyone, and especially folks with seafood allergies. Uh, a lot of the time, that allergy comes from the chitin and stuff in the exoskeleton. So if you're allergic to shrimp or shellfish in any way, you definitely should not eat bugs because it probably will anaphylaxis you, and that's no good. We don't want that. Um, and again, I do not eat bugs like for every meal. It is not like a regular part of my diet, but being open to it, I think, is key, and maybe something to think about as like maybe taking that next step in your conservation journey. You know, I see a lot of people in chat who say they've stopped consuming or consume way less meat now, that they've learned about that industry from having Winnie here as an ambassador. And that's great. And we see the same thing sometimes with the chickens and things like that. It's a little bit less with them, but this is like a weird position to be put in because everybody here, at least right now, is pretty bug positive. Um, and dealing with that versus the access to protein and things like that with very little input, um, it's a personal line, you know. It's up to everyone in chat, but I do encourage at least maybe think about it. I will say those little packaged barbecue crickets are not that good. If you can find someone to chef up some bugs for you, that's probably the best thing. I know there's a guy in New Orleans at the Audubon Insectarium there. Uh, Maya and I and Allison and I all met him at the bug conference last August that we met, or that we all met at. Um, and he does like bug cooking, and it's kind of again for the museum and sort of this big capacity of like, hey, this is an idea, maybe just kind of think about it. Um, so there is that. I did also see somebody say, I did eat one on stream, but it flew in my mouth. That's a great clip. Pirate Ships, thanks for bringing that up again. That was very funny. Yeah, I believe that clip is titled Spit and Bug Facts, because Maya asked me to tell them, to tell you guys a bug fact, and a bee or something flew straight into my mouth right as I was going to talk. Oh, Granny also found Sebastian promoting eating bugs. That's cool. Scorpion lollipop at trick-or-treating. That's pretty sick. Ooh, Ophelia, yeah, sorry to break it to you. Get tested for that seafood allergy. That's a bummer. Granny, roaches as a food concept, I haven't heard many people promoting that. Um, Whenever I've seen discussions of like large scale insect production for food sources, it's usually crickets or mealworms. if people can't go on about crickets or mealworms, there's no way they're going to go around with cockroaches just because of what you said. They're disease vectors. Some of them, maybe you have or maybe you have not been listening to my cockroach propaganda, but cockroaches get a bad name, and I won't go into that because we're right about at time now. But yeah, that's not usually one of the types of insects that I see being discussed with farming insects for food. Evan bug cooking segment. What? We'll think about that, Al. There it is. Bagel found the clip. Okay. One more question here from Nicole, and then I'll wrap it up. Let Logan get off the millipede that we've been looking at all night. Particular reason some insects are preferred over others for food besides the disease thing. Just like anything, it's inputs and what you need to put into it to get a reasonable amount of resources out of it. Crickets breed incredibly quickly, and so do mealworms. They also just have like good high protein content, and this is again for big time, like large scale consumption. Around the world, people eat a ton of different stuff. I know Allison has talked about the bellistomatids, or the giant water bugs in Asia that they eat that taste like bananas. And I know I've talked about cydnids, or the little burrowing bugs here that taste like apple Jolly Ranchers. People around the world eat a ton of different bugs, but getting them from the wild is different than on a mass scale for like large scale protein inputs for a society. So it is different. And the reason that certain things are preferred over others is just in this context is just because of how easy it is to raise them and how easy it is to get a lot of results from that. All right, y'all. Say goodbye to our millipede friend here. We've had quite a few of Hank's cousins on the stream tonight. They definitely kept y'all occupied while I yapped and yapped away. Soon we will see more bugs. We need it to warm up a little bit. But as always, I appreciate you all being here. I do hang out in the bug Discord. Someone can command that bug cord. There we go. So join that if you have questions throughout the week. Don't feel afraid to tag me. I'd be happy to look at stuff, answer questions, whatever. And I do tend to post chat recaps in there, so I will post links in there after we're done here about insect albinism, insect sleep, pointed insect specimens. I will look for a guide for North American beetles for super terrific, UCEs or genetic stuff, tarantula frame. That's all the notes that I had. But I will post that stuff in there sort of as a summary of what we talked about tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Logan, for finding us all of our wonderful millipedes. And I will see y'all around. Have a good night.